What if I told you that Disney didn't make the money you think it did, and that 2025 was going to be a bloodbath? Renegade Online. This is it. Disney tops the $5 billion global box office. And this is the sales pitch right now from Hollywood. This is the sales pitch from Deadline, from D'Alessandro, and all this kind of stuff going on. The problem is that it's so detached from any type of financial reality. When you look at top-line revenue, it's great for Deadpool, and it's great for Inside Out. You have to take into account, again, the fact, for the people that are new here, that a company like Disney's only taken home about half of that box office. Then you also have to calculate what Disney is spending on these films. Deadpool and Wolverine was probably pushing close to $200 million. Inside Out 2, if it's like most other Pixar stuff, especially with all the redos and everything after the fact, probably pushing close to $200 million as well. Then you got to calculate the marketing that these companies spend. $150 million each of these things. So just between those two films, Disney probably has somewhere to the tune of $700 to $800 million invested in these two pictures. You start whittling this down, and you take into account the $5 billion global the global box office. They're also including things like Alien Romulus. They're including things like from Fox Searchlight, other smaller pictures. It varies. With Disney, you really have to look at their headline content. You have to look at what's coming out of Lucasfilm or Marvel or Pixar, Walt Disney Animation, things of this nature. Yes, Moana 2 is going to finish out maybe close to $800 million. The problem is they had at least $100 million in the ground invested in that show before it became a movie for Disney+. You know, then how much more did they spend to convert it from that to a film for theater? Another $100 million. How much did they spend on marketing? Probably another $150. When you've got $350 million all in on Moana 2, it's just now getting past $700 million in the last couple of days after the opening that it had. That means it's barely made any profit at all. It probably has at this point somewhere around maybe 20 million, maybe 30 million, somewhere in that vicinity of actual profit. That's not the kind of profit you want when you're trying to convince shareholders to drop $300 to $400 million on an investment that will take years to come to fruition like this.
That's a lousy ROI.
Yes, exactly.
Which, as you know, is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
So is this the kind of loss in a string of losses over this year where we can say that although the studio is not the big revenue driver for Disney compared to the parks, it should be starting to matter financially.
It should. And I think that's where 2025 is going to get even more tenuous for them, because it's not just about theater. Ron, in 2025, Disney, and they have been, we're going to talk more about this, Disney has been trying to avoid the reality that it's not just their theatrical releases. The Disney Plus releases are failing. There's nothing in 2025 coming to Disney Plus from their major IPs that looks like it's going to get any better. The parks are in trouble. You've got people starting to ask questions on the earnings calls about Universal Studios in Orlando. Disney is trying to deflect this as saying, "Oh, you know, we're being conservative. We're taking that into account for our long-range projections into the summer." I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think they are. I think they're straight up lying. Or if they're not lying outright deliberately, they are deluding themselves into thinking that they're in a better position they're in. There's so many things at the venue deal. We'll talk about that as well. Disney and company were seeking a dismissal. They lost another one about a week ago. all the smoke and mirrors that Bob Iger has tried to fart out into the ether of the media, well, everybody's starting to smell it now. And that's where we're getting. Look, Wall Street, here's the deal. Do not be fooled. We've been telling you, Valiant Renegade, I've been telling you for years, do not be fooled by this. Do not be fooled by this. Disney has a really, really, frankly, shitty 2025 coming forward. I think we're looking at some serious losses here on the theatrical distribution side. Again, I told you, Pro and I both did, I think. Deadpool and Wolverine was going to be a big hit. Nobody denied that. We told you that was going to be one of the shining stars in a cesspool of darkness. That Deadpool and Wolverine was going to bring the money. It did. But that was not because of Disney, but because of Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman and the characters they were playing. That was it. Had nothing to do with the MCU. And we thought that Inside Out 2 might have a chance, although we didn't think it would be as big as it did. But it was because it hit a very, very specific note. It hit a demographic at the right time, at the right moment for young women out there. Moana obviously didn't do. I'm sorry, Moana 2. Look at me. This is to tell me that Disney had the single biggest and most watched streaming film, according to them, of all of 2023, the original Moana film from many years before that was then just re-released on Disney Plus. And they couldn't parlay that into even half of Barbie. You're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong. Moana 2, as of right now, still has very little chance of beating Wicked. And Wicked ain't doing that good.
From the point of view of American industrial history, frankly, without knowing anything else about the particulars, without getting into the DEI and the politics and all the missteps that we've talked about so many times in this program, it is almost inevitable, it seems, that once Disney got so big and put so much of its management efforts into acquisition instead of creativity, that it would lose its groove. It's like General Motors. They're just, there must have been someone who wrote when they paid so much for Marvel and so much for ABC and so much for Lucasfilm, so much for Pixar. It couldn't go on. There was no way the reason these enterprises succeeded to the extent that they did, Marvel being a weird exception. There's no question that Disney did get the benefit of a sweet spot in Marvel in terms of the films. But the creativity inevitably was going to be leached out of these companies once they became acquired by essentially a creative monopolist. And a market dominant company like Disney, which dominates, as we discussed so many times, horizontally and vertically. So to the extent that it doesn't, it has cannibalized itself. Then again, so have all the companies that went into streaming. But just a kind of a general observation, none of this should be surprising. And you see Robert Winsman in the chat blaming Kathleen Kennedy. I agree. All the villains are still villains. The people who made the awful decisions, the people who made the obviously stupid decisions that everyone knew they were stupid at the time, they get all the demerits that they're entitled to. But fundamentally, one way or another, it seems to me that it was always inevitable that Disney could not continue to create, and in fact, probably really stopped being a bona fide creative force quite some time ago.
Well, here's something to offer, Ron, and you see if you agree with this. To me, Disney feels like Apple post Steve Jobs. And whenever you have a company the way that they function is they have to have a creative genius at the top. Disney did phenomenally well, of course, under Walt. That's how it became what it was. But under John Lasseter, who operated as the chief creative officer of the company, under John Lasseter, they had that Walt-like figure, that Steve Jobs-like figure, and that let Bob Iger be the acquisition guy. As soon as they said bye-bye to John Lasseter, it was like they said bye-bye to Steve Jobs. Apple hasn't made anything revolutionary since their revolutionary leader stepped away. I mean, they tried. Apple tried to bring out this VR headset, right, in the last year. It has bombed miserably. Nobody's using it.
To be fair, though, I think there is a very strong argument when it comes to Apple that it hit kind of like it, in a much grander way than was the case with Crocs. It hit the useful life. In other words, I've got an iPhone 14, and go into any Apple forum. People say you're crazy that if you've already got a 14, that's a phone whose battery you replace, because to spend money on a 15 or 16 is foolish. There's no, like, what more can we? So right. It's possible. Listen, in some ways, Steve Jobs died right on time. He didn't have to hang around long enough to, or perhaps he was even that greater visionary, than we can imagine.
Right. The question is, could he have invented another paradigm shift? Because that's what the touchscreen phone is a paradigm shift.
But unless we're positing that there can no longer be good entertainment, that we've reached the end of all genres of entertainment in which Disney participates. It has the budget, it has the network for distribution, it has every tool you would think besides creative independence, which might be the whole point. It should be different. But what we did see is, of course, I keep coming back to this, the idea that franchises are inexhaustible sources of successful revenue. I don't think you need a business degree to know that could not have gone on forever, and it didn't.
Mm-hmm. They need a vision. Disney needs a vision today. They don't have a vision, and we have talked about one of the confusions that comes about Valiant is that people have come to believe that we're pushing Disney to be a conservative company, and if they don't do that, then we're not going to be happy with them. And it's like, no, you've missed what the financial side of this is. The financial side says, you need to be able to create a product that speaks to the broadest spectrum of families across at least North America and probably worldwide. Okay. And so that means you need to be in the mainstream middle. Okay. But the second thing, and we haven't talked much about this, and it may be something we talk about in the future, is you have to have some sort of North Star. You've got to have some sort of vision. You've got to have a guiding light within a company, something to fight for. And Disney has lost that, because what Disney has become is primarily an acquisition and burnout company. You acquire the studio, you burn out the studio, you buy another one. That's what they do. And
that's what I've been saying for years. That's what I've been telling the audience. That's all. Disney, Bob Iger's legacy is not one of creativity. Bob Iger, if you really go back and look, his legacy of creativity is virtually nothing. It is the acquisition of other properties that already had a good team in place, which in and of itself is great from an M&A standpoint, right? That's what you want with a CEO. The problem I have with Iger is that he fancies himself publicly, and he treats himself, he promotes himself and the company, of course, the Bob Iger Company, formerly the Walt Disney Company, as being, the creative genius storytellers. They aren't. Bob Iger just spends other people's money to go buy shit that's already working and already popular, rebrand it as Disney shit up until the point where they can't make it work anymore. And that's largely due to the fact that, when you look at the lineage of Marvel and Star Wars, like we always tell folks, and again, I know this sounds repetitive, guys out there, but we have so many new viewers. There's 1,500 of you watching on YouTube right now. Now there are 200-300 watching on X. So smash the like button for me, much appreciated. Follow these folks out there that are on the panel. But here's the deal. Bob Iger, he took Pixar that had John Lasseter attached. Bob Iger took that and just let him do his thing until they got rid of John Lasseter, and then Bob Iger literally had no idea what to do with the Pixar anymore. The talent pool was empty. The talent pool left, and Bob Iger did not know how to replenish it, but for the DEI initiatives that he had already put in place. And then we wind up with Pixar and Disney Animation going into the child grooming realm with LGBTQ, transgender, let's queer your kids crap. Let's put transvestites and cross-dressers in Disneyland, men with beards and mustaches in a dress playing with your little daughters at Bippity Boppity Boutique in Disneyland. No, that's the Bob Iger Disney. Now they're trying to act like, well, this didn't happen, right? They're trying to act like now that, we're going to fix all that. Bob Iger, his own words.
It didn't happen, and we're going to fix it.
Right. It didn't happen, and we're going to fix it. It's like Bob Iger's thing is, I took an 11-month vacation while Bob Chapek was here. And, Bob Chapek, I can't believe that Bob Chapek in 11 months that had virtually no control over anything for most of those months, managed to wreck everything. And now I'm back here to fix it again. Get your head out of your ass. It's like, and look, Hollywood is running interference. We have stories for this right now. It's been hilarious to watch this stuff, but I need to get some of these super chats here real quick. Let's move into the next little bits and pieces here. Just as a real quick follow-up, I want to kind of get this while I can now, because we talked about Disney 2025. Let me remind folks real quick what we're talking about in terms of Disney 2025 being terrible. Because we don't have it yet for Captain Falcon, but we are starting to see it for Snow White, right? We've seen this. Disney's live action Snow White looks absolutely dreadful from a few weeks ago here from Forbes magazine and Eric Kane. We've got Disney has a Trump problem from a few weeks ago here from Newsweek. Okay. We've got Wish It Away. Will the live action Snow White be a new low for Disney from The Guardian? I mean,
like Chink Uger at a Turning Point USA event, the mainstream media is suddenly beginning to agree with us, Valiant.
Speaking of that, with Chink Uygur, I mean, did you see Keith Olbermann? Keith Olbermann, I don't know how he's not in a straitjacket in a padded room.
Get out of here. You've obviously seen my GIF when you say that.
I have not.
All right.
I really haven't. No, I'm serious.
All right, I believe. All right, I believe you.
If I had, I would have had it queued up and ready to go.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna find it for you.
Okay, pull that one up. But no, this is the point here, is that this is the kind of thing. People are already forecasting the demise, and this is March, y'all. They haven't talked about Captain Falcon yet, because while Rachel Zegler, here's the thing, Anthony Mackie, at the very least, is smart enough not to run his mouth too hot out of school. Like, Anthony Mackie's not going out there like Rachel Zegler and talking about how the character that she's portraying, the movie that put Disney on the map, right? Rachel Zegler's out there talking about how Snow White is outdated and it's sexist, and it's demeaning to women, and they're not doing that kind of thing anymore.
She'll never bleach her skin, Valiant. You can't make her.
Yeah. And how the prince is not going to be a stalker this time around, and how this story is all going to be about how Snow White finds her vaginal power of a woman and saves whatever bullshit that's in this movie. I mean, look, here's the thing. Disney's got $400 million sunk into this shit show. I can't wait to see them lose every penny, because that's what everything is pointing to. And that's just March. That doesn't take into account February with Captain Falcon. But Anthony Mackie, at the very least, who was older, wiser, and obviously more mature than Rachel Zegler, he's not out there saying, at least that anything I've seen. I realize that Disney is saying it. I realize that Kevin Feige is promoting it. But I haven't seen Anthony Mackie out there, to my best knowledge, out there talking about how it's time that Captain America was a black man, and how it's time that we need to erase the white tropes of the past. He's not. Rachel Zegler is doing this to tear down the character she's playing. Anthony Mackie, at the very least, is not trying to tear down Steve Rogers, not trying to tear down Chris Evans. I'm not saying that's going to save it, but I'm just saying I at least give him credit for not acting like Rachel Zegler.
How would Mackie have time to come out and do these things, Valiant? He's busy reshooting it for the 17th time. You can't post on Twitter if you're reshooting again. They can't stop reshooting it.
Well, there's that. There is that problem.
Well, the Hulk originally was orange, and it was big orange man bad, and of course that had to go. I had to get rid of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the first two movies. And again, remember, Mufasa, most of the theatrical run is going to be in 2025 since it just opened. So a lot of that crediting is going to happen later. So it's going to be, I cannot wait for the February earnings call at Disney. I really can't, because we're going to start getting a real feel for how bad things are, because it's not just, of course, in the theaters. And look, this isn't all of it. What's coming up later that year? You've got Captain Falcon, which is probably going to do very poorly. You've got Snow White, which by all accounts right now is probably going to do very poorly. You've got, following that, what? The Thunderbolts? Does anybody know what a Thunderbolt is? No. Nobody knows what that is. That's the next Marvel movie. That's going to fail. How about the fact that Ilio, the next Pixar movie, Ilio. Anybody know what that is? Nope, didn't think you did. Ilio, guess what's going up against Ilio? Day and date of that release. Anybody?
I don't
Somebody?
know. What do you got?
June 13th, Ilio releases on the same day as How to Train Your Frickin' Dragon live action.
With not so blonde Ingrid or Agnes or whatever.
It won't matter. It won't matter. It won't matter.
I agree with you.
Astrid.
It won't
yeah.
matter. Astrid,
it won't matter.
Right.
Astrid. Yeah, it won't freaking matter. This is gonna be Sonic versus Mufasa all over again. It's gonna be the same damn thing. You're gonna have Pixar. Pete Docter's next thing is coming out. At least the last schedule that I saw. I think Tom from Midnight's Edge reposted it about a week ago. I think Ilio and How to Train Your Dragon are set to drop in the same week, if not the same day. That's going to be a bloodbath for Ilio, for this Pixar thing. And there's really nothing left in the rest of 2025 for Disney to really glom onto, right?
Oh, come on, Thunderdolts.
Oh, I mentioned Thunderdolts a minute ago.
Yeah,
Does anybody know what that is? No. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.